Okay, hi there, everybody. How are you? Hope you're having a great Global Hack Day. um, yeah, how's everybody's workshop going? Hi there, Sparky Circuit student. Hi there, Starfire Goo. It's good to see some familiar faces out there in the audience. Yeah, I hope that all of you have had the chance to try and check in for the event. But in case you didn't, let me just send it along so that it's available to everybody. Hi there, Dev Deep Singha. All right, I'm going to see if I can get our slides going, and then we can get marching on our way. And Shemarie says, watching the results come in from our statewide primary. That's exciting. Yeah, but yeah, TyPy for sure. We're going to be working a little bit with TyPy, a little bit with clustering algorithms. It's going to be great. But yeah, as I mentioned, it's really important to check in. I think this is the wrong link, but I just wanted to say I'm Steven, for those of you who don't know me or weren't able to catch the Today in Global Hack Week stream. I've been a coach at Major League Hacking for more than 5 years now. And yeah, I'm super happy to be here with you. But before we get started any further, I wanted to actually go ahead and ask you a little bit about your experience in the past with data visualization, um, and clustering algorithms. So let me just ask you all a little bit about that. Let's see. Just going to add one last question, one last minute addition here. Is my volume okay, by the way, for everybody? I know I have some music in the background, sort of trying something new, to see if that'll work at all. Here's the link to our slides for the day, in case you want to check those out. But yeah, the first thing I wanted to do was ask you all some questions to get to know you better. And so I have this great quiz for us to take and start right off the bat with. Now that I've introduced myself, I'd love for, yeah, to just know a little more about you. So if you're able, go ahead and click into that link, and you'll get to know a little bit about our community. All right, so we have about 6 responses so far, which is awesome. And yeah, just let's take a look at those so that we can see what folks are saying. So we have 6 responses, and it looks like all of you have heard of data visualization, which is awesome. I feel like most people in the tech space have this these days, but yeah, as I wrote, this term could refer to charts, maps, any form of data that you may have interacted with online. And have you built a data visualization before? This one's a little bit less people. Only about 2/3 of you have built a data visualization before. So that's great. For the 1/3, you will learn how to do that today. Have you heard of TyPy? This one, even less people have heard of TyPy. So yeah, we're going to be looking into that and getting familiar with the technology. And finally, have you heard of clustering algorithms? Again, sort of mixed bag here, and I'm sure that of those of you who have heard of clustering algorithms, I bet you have not all implemented one. And so then Hack Week is truly global, so I just wanted to know, where are you all logging on from? And it looks like we have a sizable contingent from North America and a sizable contingent from Asia. So that's awesome to see. Welcome, everybody. And yes, don't forget to check in. So I went ahead and posted the link in the chat, and make sure that you are checked in for the event to get your points. But yeah, we're going to jump right in with setting up our code environment. So I want you to download Visual Studio Code, especially if you haven't already done so. This is a really important step because we're going to use the Visual Studio Code environment in our workshop today, so we can all be on the same page. So if you haven't already, there's the link. I'll copy it into the chat too, so that you can go there from the chat. And if you go on this link, it should take you to the following website. And you can just pick whichever download is best for your system. This is interesting that you can even download for the Snap Store. I'm surprised what that is. It must be Snapcraft. Okay, I thought it was Snapchat. But that's good. So yeah, go ahead and download. And it should bring you into Visual Studio Code. And in order to show you a little bit what VS Code looks like, I'm going to go in myself. And so let's check on that. Yeah, so it looks a little bit like this, your Visual Studio Code environment. And you can plug in on the Explorer to check the different files on your computer and get one going. You can even create a new file. I love Jupyter Notebooks, but we might use some kind of Python file today. So yeah, and you can use this program for any programming language that you know. So it's really a great tool to have even after Global Hack Week. But yeah, I hope all of you were able to get on. And so now we're actually going to continue along and go to our next step, which is to open the application. Like I said, type new file. And hey there, 404. Good to see you out there in the chat. Welcome. Glad to see that you're there. And Shemri says, do you use the TyPy VS Code extensions? I am not sure if we will get to that on this workshop, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah, there's some really neat ones. Yeah. But yeah, so you'll click on New File, and we'll select Python file. So you'll want to get that, and it'll say Untitled 1. And then check your Python version in the terminal. So it's really important that you have the right version of Python, which should be between 3.8 and 3.11. If it's too high or too low, the version might not be compatible with TypePy. All right, everybody, hang on. I'm going to close my blinds. I can see the sun is starting to set where I am, and I'm just going to close my blinds. All right, got my blinds sorted out, and yeah, we have some new folks in the chat. Welcome to GRP Ask It and 404. So yeah, give me a chat if you are past these steps. If you already know that you have VS Code installed and your Python version is correct, just go ahead and let me know. All right, looks like we have some dinosaurs. So I'll take that as a yes from Chemarie. And yeah, let me show you the next slide then. We're also going to need some dependencies. So if you do not already have them, you'll need pip install torch and pip install transformers. I put pip and pip3 here because sometimes your pip will not work. And if you get an error with pip, the first thing to try is using pip3, because some computers have the variable on their path listed as pip3. So regardless, go ahead and install torch and transformers. You could actually do this in one command by typing torch space transformers, but yeah, I just figured it would be a little bit simpler and more clear to write it this way. So go ahead and install those dependencies. I'm going to see if I still have my TypePy environment going. I should. We did a similar workshop a little while ago. Yeah, I do have my TypePy environment, so that's great. All right. And now for the big install. So Hugh thought Torch was a big package. TypePy will also be big. That's because we need to install a lot of different things. But actually, I think TypePy might even be a smaller package than things like Torch and Transformers. So I think I just wrote big install to mean, now the grand finale. So pip install TypePy should get you all the way there. Give a couple minutes for that. Interesting opinion from the community. So Marie says, I think TypePy is more powerful than Streamlit, but Streamlit is easier to work with. So thanks for that comment. And yeah, if anybody else in the chat wants to chime in about how they feel about TypePy versus Streamlit versus sometimes there's other frameworks that people may not have used before or heard of before. So if you know some other one, please feel free to jump in the chat with it. But yeah, so once you have TypePy installed, we're going to install the TypePy Studio VS Code extension. So yes, we will be working, Shamri, as you asked, with the TypePy Studio extension a little bit. So I'm going to give a live demo of how you should actually go about getting the extension going. So what you're going to do is open up your Visual Studio Code, and you'll want to click on this little guy here, the puzzle piece. So click on the puzzle piece to your left. And you can click this search bar, search extensions in the marketplace. you'll want to type in TyPy, and that will find TyPy Studio for you. So when you click on that, it should be this first one, and we're going to install it. So just go ahead and click the blue install button. All right. Interesting. There's also a TyPy code Copilot. I don't know, but I'm just going to install it. You don't have to, but yeah, just curious if that will help us write our codes. Who knows? No harm in trying, right? So there's my live demo of that concept. Oh, Shemri says, don't install that if you have GitHub Copilot installed. Okay. Yeah, maybe I'll just uninstall that then. That's a good point. Yeah. So, all right, let's continue along and go with any questions. So does anybody have any questions about the install process, about getting Visual Studio Code up and running? Now is the time to ask those before we move on to some more complicated topics. Oh, no worries, Shamarie. I can see you've got some some dinosaurs going, so that's great. It's great to have some feedback. Otherwise, I feel like I'm just kind of talking into the void. And any comments people have, suggestions are really great for the community and for all of our learnings. So please feel free to put those into the chat. Okay, so Natalia asks, you've installed TyPy through Terminal and VS Code also? Yes, so let me go ahead and rewind. So first we installed VS Code. So I'm assuming you already have moved past that step, Natalia, since you're asking about later steps. So once you have VS Code installed, we're going to check our Python version. So all you do is type Python -- version. You want to make sure that inside of your environment, you have the appropriate version between 3.8 and 3.11. And then you'll want to install the dependencies, Torch and Transformers. This is taking place in the terminal. And if you're using environments, you'll want to put it in the TyPy specific environment. Oh, you have Python 3.12. Let me see. I'm going to look up the TyPy documentation to see if Python compatibility. Let's see if, oh, it looks like Python 3.12 will work according to their website. So I guess that's the a new version. So it should be good to use Python 3.12. But yeah, so then you'll install TyPy through the terminal, okay? So that's to answer your question. Install TyPy through terminal, and then what you'll do in VS Code is install the TyPy Studio. And this is going to be a Visual Studio Code extension that you can get through the extension store. So if you have any trouble finding these, locating these, let me know. I'm happy to help. All right, so why don't we move on? We're going to build our first TyPy scenario now, recognizing that TyPy scenarios consist of nodes and tasks. So, for example, a node might be a name, and you might then use a task called build message, which incorporates the name into a message. So you could send a message to your friend. Let's say you send a message, I don't mean to pick on anybody in particular, but let's say we send a message to Sparky Circuit Student. So the name would be Sparky Circuit Student, and build message would say, hello, Sparky Circuit Student, and then that would be the message on the outflow there. All right. So, quiz, let's think of our own scenario. So, you're going to use the terminology of nodes and tasks to think of your own scenario. And so, why don't we follow this link? I sent the form out in the chat for you to easily get. And I'm going to ask you to fill out this scenario. I'll delete some of these previous responses because we asked also 6 months ago in our original TyPy workshop the same question. So I'm hoping to get some new ideas from all of you. So go ahead and fill out this form. I'll give you a minute to think about this. All right, folks, we're going to come back now and look at some of the responses that you all had. Looks like we had at least one response. So I'm going to read that response. Sales report generation. Yeah, that's a great example. So, for example, one node would be the client, right? Or maybe the product if you're reporting product sales reports from a particular sale. And so that would be a great example. And the task could be to generate report. And then the outgoing node could be the sales report itself. So that would be a great example. Let me check. It seems like we have a couple more. One scenario I've used is tracking food insecurity in TyPy. Okay, great idea. And so maybe you would have some nodes for accepting data about food, demographics, geography, health, and then some task could generate some statistics or maybe some metric of food insecurity. That could be the final node. And then e-commerce selling would be another great example. So you could have your customers as inputs, your products, and then processing the sales or sending shipments as some tasks that the TyPy could do. So great ideas, everybody. We're gonna now code this up a little bit. So we're gonna configure the TyPy scenario. Let me see here. Yep, share this tab instead. And so I have some data here for you to input. There should be, I think, some repository on my website for this. Sure hope so. Yes, so I'll send the repository so that you don't have to just, go through and do this all yourself. So all this code is coming from the typytutorial.py file, and I'll link that as well so that you don't have to worry about typing it all out yourself. Okay? But basically, the first step is the configuration step where we'll configure a simple TyPy scenario. And the first thing we're going to do is import some core modules. So we have our config and our core that get ported in from TyPy. I also have GUI in there later, but if you want to put that in now, that's okay. And there's a little window hiding it, but I'll type it in the chat what we're missing. It's the import TyPy STP line. So that's what we're missing. And the message function is going to be a task block. So we're getting that, that function build message. Its input or its parameter is a string called name, and that name would be the node. And then we're going to return hello name, which would be the message. All right, so that's how the task block connects to two nodes, is through the parameter or the argument, and then the return statement. So the next step after that would be to configure the data nodes. So we can just name two data nodes. I named them data underscore node underscore config. And so we're using these configure nodes and giving them one argument, which is the ID. So each node will have its own ID, and we're matching the format of the original example. So I'll go back to the original example. We have our name and our message. So when we use the IDs, we're using input name and message just to match that original scenario. Okay, and then configuring the task is similar, but we actually need to connect our task to the different nodes. So just like in the function, our configuration underscore task method is going to match that too. So build message task config is how we'll name this variable, and it will also be using the config module. So the first string argument in this method is build message, which is going to be the name of this task. And then build underscore message is the function that tells the task how it should execute. And then remember, we said we need to connect our task to nodes. So the first node will be the input node, and the second will be the output. So that's where we'll get our arguments from in the inputs and our returns to the outputs. All right. And finally, we configure this scenario. And the scenario is what's composed of the tasks plus nodes. So if we go back, I'm going to go back to our first slide here. Remember, scenario is what this black box would be. It would be all three of these nodes and task elements. Okay, so now we're going to code this up in our build step. So we're going to build the scenario using if name equals main. That just gets the code running as soon as we run our Python script. And the first line here instantiates a core service, which is a necessary element for TyPy to run appropriately. So you'll type core.run for that. And once you have the core running, we can create a scenario based on our configuration. So the core is what's helping us process all that stuff, in a sense, interpret the configuration for this particular environment. So we type TP, which is what we initialed as TyPy.create underscore scenario. And then as the argument, we pass in our scenario configuration. And now we have our whole entire scenario configured, but we don't have any data running through our scenario yet. So we can just write a value to the input name. And in this case, I used my own name, Stephen. But you could feel free to use whatever name you want for the inputs here. And then we will submit the scenario to be run. So we'll type hello scenario.submit. And that basically starts the game of passing this input into the scenario, and it goes through all the pipeline, through the tasks and everything, and updates the values that are downstream. And in this case, it's a really simple pipeline. It's just The input name goes to the build message function, which returns the message. And so we can then read that message out by typing print hello scenario dot message, which is then dot read method. And notice we are using the ID to locate it. And if you'll go back to our previous slide, you'll notice we used ID equals message for that message data node. So when we type hello scenario.message, that's the attribute we're going for. All right. So let's test this out. I want you all to try to run your Python files in the terminal and let me know what you get. I want to give you all about 1 or 2 minutes to go through this. So I'm just going to let you have that for just about 1 or 2 minutes. All right, so we had a little bit of time to think about this, and Natalia says, I'm getting this error when I try to install Pi, TyPy. Due to an OS error, the system cannot find the file specified. I wonder what that could be. Gonna screenshot yours and maybe see if I can search that error. All right. I found something for you to try, Natalia. Maybe you could try this command, which will force reinstall the Slugify. Yeah, I'm not sure. I've never run into that error myself, but it did seem like a couple people have had that error. So, yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and move on a little bit here. This is what you should see when you get a successful run. I'll zoom in a little bit to this. It should say development mode, and then which indicates that we're not in the production. And then type job, and that will build the whole thing. And then the output should then render hello Stephen. So there you go. And yes, try to build a, that's a great suggestion. So try to build a brand new environment with no other things, because I'm pretty sure Slugify, that library might not even be part of our dependencies for TyPy. So that might be something you installed beforehand, or a dependency that automatically got installed on your environment. So yeah, just try to make a new environment. I think that would be a great idea. So, all right, then hopefully you all got that message, or hello, whatever your name was, the one you used. But now it's time to actually do the test. So I know I said, hey, test it out on your own, but now we're going to actually test. So take the quiz, please. I'm going to edit it so that the old responses are gone. And you should be able to take it now. Let me copy the link and paste it in the chat. I think I just did that actually, but I'll just paste it one more time so that you have it. And yeah, hopefully you all are getting a little bit the hang of TyPy now that we are already finished with some basic analysis. And I wanted to show you one last response that came into our previous survey while we were coding. An ML pipeline, like data processing model. And yeah, that's exactly right. And actually today we're going to implement some ML features, some ML model, some clustering algorithm in TyPy. So that's a great comment and foresees the future. So I just wanted to highlight that for everybody. Yeah, and we're getting a few responses in already from our quiz survey, but I'm going to wait for a few more to come in. Oh, sorry about that, everybody. My microphone was muted. I still have not gotten as many responses as I'd like, so I think we're going to take a brief break and then go on to the graphical interface. So just give it 2 more minutes to check for a break. All right, everybody. Looks like we have finished our break. Chemery logging off. Yes, we did this workshop about 6 months ago. So, and I do remember you attending. So that's great. And hopefully you learned a little about clustering algorithms back then. But take care and good luck watching your primary. So yeah, we are now finished with the break. And so I'm going to review some of these quiz responses. So first we asked, name two elements that could compose a TiPi scenario. And the first element was nodes of count 3 and tasks of count 3. So everybody got this question right. The two elements are nodes and tasks. And then asked, consider the following code: config.configureTask, build message, build underscore message, input name, data node, CFG, and then list the arguments that are involved in the message. So the arguments involved, as these first two say, actually all three correctly say, there are 4 arguments. So and I like this last one because it actually gives some explanation. So the task ID, that's really important, the function to execute, the input data node configuration, and the output data node configuration. This is a great answer. This should be a textbook answer, whoever wrote that one. Great job. Maybe give yourself a pat on the back in the comments. But yeah, and then one more question. What does the following line of code accomplish where hello scenario is a TiPi scenario object? And all of you said it runs the scenario, which is the correct answer. So excellent, excellent work. And now we're going to move on to graphical interface as we promised. We'll import the GUI features. So that's what I meant by including this GUI import on your file. And then we also have the page variable. So this could be Markdown, HTML, Python, but whatever you use, it's useful for laying out the user interface. So for example, in this line that I have here in our code demo, we have name, which will be a input object. So this input will be almost like a text field, and whatever value it takes on will be the input name. And then we have a submit button, which will submit the scenario when clicked, and then a message text field. So this is not editable like the input, but it will contain the variable message. And we use 3 quotation marks because that is how you write a multi-line string in Python. And so AskGet842 says, module not found error, no module named TyPy. So here's some recommendations if you're facing that error. First, when you are on line 4, make sure that you import TyPy as TP. That's going to be really important to get the module, and then refer to it as TP throughout. But if even you have this line and you're still getting an error, what you'll need to do is actually install TyPy in terminal. So make sure that you are using the correct environment, the same environment that you're running all your Visual Studio codes in, and type pip install TyPy or pip3 install TyPy, depending on which one you're using. And actually, why don't we check this ourselves? So I'm going to do a live demo for all of you in case you're stuck on this concept of getting TyPy in your machine. So you'll go to your desktop or your Visual Studio Code, and we type File, New File, Python file. Okay, so let's type import TyPy as TP, and then we'll try to run this code. Okay. And you can see when we did this, it gave it to me. But you see how in the bottom here, we have a terminal. So we could always try to pip install TyPy. And then when you try to run again, it should work. All right. So now we're going to move on, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of a formality here. So the variable would be input name here. That's an example of a variable. In TyPy, we're using curly braces to denote that. And then the type of the layout object is indicated in pipes. So you put a pipe here, input, or pipe here and button. So that's how you indicate the type. And you can instantiate the variables now. So we're now going to use a different input name. I just stopped using Stephen because I wanted to use some other one. But you can put whatever name you want as the input name. And then the message for now, just to begin, we'll put an empty list, okay? So that will just indicate that there's no message yet. We are going to wait for the action to occur, the user to submit the button, to push the submit button, and then we'll get that going. And abstracting this, we can also abstract the submit functionality through a callback. So actions will allow the application to be interactive. And the key concept here, which is also a concept in a lot of programming, is to have state variables. So the state is going to be something that you can update, and something that is possible for the user to change throughout the application in an interactive way. So for example, we're going to have this function submit scenario, and we're going to pass a new parameter called state into this function. And we can now use state to write to the scenario. So we're going to write the state.input name into the scenario, and then push the submit button, or in our case, we'll just type submit method, and then read the message as usual, but pass it on to the state. So we do state.message and assign that to scenario.message.read. So we're now abstracting the submit functionality using this callback. Okay, so let's rebuild the scenario now. And when we do that, we're going to add the line GUI page.run. Remember, page is this thing right here, this string that we have. So when we use that string, we'll now generate a page for us, and we're ready to test again. So run your Python code, and it will tell you this to go to this address 127.0.0.1:5000. So this is the local host port 5000, really famous address, and it's actually your home address. So it's the address of your home computer, wherever your server might be, and then your server is being served on port 5000. Okay, so we now have a name field. Adam Smith is the default name. You could put actually an empty string here too if you want, but I just wanted to put a default name. And then when the user clicks the red submit button, it will submit you their name. So here it is, Stephen, and the message is, hello, Stephen. Pretty cool, right? So we now have an interactive system. And when the user clicks on this red submit button, oh, sorry, I'm not sharing this this tab correctly. Yep. So when the user clicks on this red submit button, the message will then pop up, hello, Stephen. Okay. And now for the true test, we're going to have a challenge. I'm actually going to skip this break because we were running a little bit low on time. So the challenge is to add another control to this project. We have 3 controls right now, text, input, and button, but you could do your best to add another. So let's go to the documentation to check this out. There's a bunch of different controls, and one example is text here, button and input. So these are all things we've already implemented. But now look at this. We have number as well, which is an input kind of input, which can do specifically only numbers. A slider, which will allow your user to set some range, and even a toggle. So the way you implement these is the same way you would implement the previous ones. So since you all didn't get to see it because my screen wasn't sharing correctly, but you can check the page variable, which has some input, some text in the pipes, and you could just replace that with one of these toggle or slider or anything like that. Let's keep looking actually at this tab. We have date, chart, download file. That's really cool. Yeah, there's a lot of really great tools here, what they call controls, and you can definitely learn a lot from that documentation. But I'm going to swing us back to the challenge. And my idea is to add a formality switch. So this is going to change our message for us based on whether we want a formal message or an informal message. Maybe we're talking to a friend or we're talking to a colleague. So we want to change this, and we're going to use the formality variable to do so. And for toggle, there's an additional parameter to specify LOV, which are the options. So we can do yes or no. And so I'm just going to ask the user, do you want formality? Yes. Or do you want informal message? No. So let's update the configuration. After all, we're going to need another node for this new task. And the node is going to be the formality data node. So we're going to say configure data node, ID equals formality. And then in our message, we're going to use an if conditional statement to handle 2 different cases. So our build message function now needs another input node, which is going to be that formality node. And formal is going to have a value yes or no. So if formal is true, you want a formal message, we'll use the word greetings. And if else, you want some kind of informal message, all right, hey there. So those are two good greetings for two different situations. And the task must now connect to the new node or function. So we have the build message task configuration, and we're going to type build message, which is the ID of the function. Remember that function has not changed too much, or sorry, of the task. And then build message is the function name. And then we have a list now of input nodes. So it's not just one. So we need to actually write a list data type. So we have the hard braces there to denote that. And then in the last argument, we have our output data node, which is the message. And so we'll update the scenario build / submit. So in this case, what we're changing is we're adding a new write statement. So now the write will also include the formality, okay? So when we go into this TyPy workshop code, all of this should be implemented already in the example code. So we're now reaching the point where the example code perfectly matches the slides. Okay. And so when we try again, we have this new formality button, and this time we've selected no, so we get, hey there, Adam Smith. But if we select yes, we get greetings, Adam Smith. So the user is once again updating state of the web app. And because it's able to update state, it can then render interactive elements like this message. So here's our wrap up for this section. And then we're going to move on to our clustering algorithm. So check this survey. I have Insane Ghoul coming in late, but it's great to have you. We are teaching about TyPy. So if you've never heard of it, it's a great data visualization tool. And we're actually just finishing up this portion. So for if you just want to get the code from GitHub, here it is. But we're going to move on now and actually do some machine learning, because this is, after all, AI ML week. So we want to get some machine learning inputs as well. And we're going to be doing what they call clustering algorithm. All right, and I'll paste a link to the slides again, because you're going to want those if you're following along at home. It helps you get the links easier, get the final codes easier. So yeah. Let's go into this, this form, which is TyPy Quiz 4. All right, folks, I have 0 responses so far. Just going to wait for some to trickle in. Give you a few minutes to think about this. Okay, so we had one answer here, and it's to develop ML algorithms. And that's right. So we're going to now move to developing ML algorithms. So we're going to move on to charts. This is another control element. And we're going to do a data visualization. So we're going to need the GUI library, just like we did before. And we're going to add some data, okay? So you're going to type this list comprehension, which is x squared for x in range 1 through 10. So you're going to then have GUI and put in a string. Remember, this is our page, our layout, and just put a simple chart element. So it's going to have list to display and then chart and then run. So there it is, an exponential plot. And we're now going to improve upon this by actually plotting some real data. But before we do, I want to make some notes about charts because this is a really simple example that we just put up. They're built on top of Plotly. So Plotly accepts NumPy and data frame objects too, not just our list. And additionally, there's a marker keyword argument which has the following keys: size, color, symbol, opacity. That's really important when you're plotting points. And we're going to use the properties of this chart to build our ML-driven data visualization. So now we're going to our ML model. Remember, we talked about this. And the data is coming from the old faithful geyser eruptions. Actually, this data, I think, originates from the Park Service. I don't know if you've ever seen the video. This is a data set favorite of mine. I sometimes show this video. But we're going to download it. I actually have it available already in the TaiPi Workshop GitHub repository. And it's actually this faithful.csv, okay? And let's click in there just to check it out. So we actually have eruption, waiting, and this is the minutes of the eruption time and how long it was until the next one. So it's a really simple data set with just two variables. Okay. And so we're going to build the ML model. We're not going to focus too much on this, but the model we're implementing is called a k-means clustering algorithm. And so this is the video I mentioned if you're interested in watching about eruptions. But I actually want to show you a little bit more about the k-means clustering algorithm because there's a great visualization on, believe it or not, Wikipedia. They have a great GIF. So I'm going to show that now. So what you're noticing is that the algorithm is iterating and it's actually optimizing. So it's going to have a central point where these three different categories meet. And from there, it will categorize the different data based on which bounds they're in. So these three centroids, which are blue, yellow, and red centroids, you can see them shifting around as the iteration grows. And they're being optimized so that they reduce the standard squared errors, SSEs, or sum of squared errors, SSEs, for each category. So basically, you're getting a distance from center type analysis, similar to linear regression. So the idea here is to find three different clusters of data without telling the model any training, any human input. So we're not telling the model anything about the data distribution. We're not telling it which points are red, blue, and yellow. It's actually figuring all that out on its own. And this is what we call an unsupervised learning algorithm. Okay, so we're going to need some additional libraries for our ML model to run properly. And two of those are going to be NumPy and Pandas. So those are good for data structures and manipulation. So if you want to install those, go ahead and do it in your environment. And then we also are going to install sklearn. This is where our machine learning algorithm, our k-means clustering algorithm, will live. Okay. And we can import these libraries into our program. So we're going to type from sklearn.cluster import k-means to import that k-means method. And we're also going to import two additional methods, numpy and pandas. And then we're going to read in the data using a pandas data frame object. So use df equals pd.readcsv and then faithful.csv. So this assumes that you've already downloaded my repository. And if you haven't, just go on GitHub and type download.zip file or clone the repository if you know how to do that. All right, and then we will store the X values of the data frame in a format that is readable by the k-means clustering model. I say X because X is a common notation for training data, and that's exactly what these eruption and weighting data are. So there's no need to define any target for training. We just need these two features, eruption and weighting. All right. And next we will construct the k-means model and fit it to our data set. So we'll use the fit method, and let me go through a little in detail. What are these model parameters? So first, n clusters specifies the number of clusters. So you can use your intuition for this. And as I mentioned, based on the National Park Service park rangers, they know that this geyser is bimodal, meaning there's two different modes, so our cluster should be two. And then we'll initialize the centroids at a random position. So this actually means that we'll get a slightly different answer every time, but it should give us a reasonable estimate. And then max iter will tell us the maximum number of iterations that we will allow for the k-means algorithm to proceed. So you saw in that GIF that it proceeded for 17 iterations, and it stops once it's unable to minimize any further. In reality, we're not going to get to 300. Just set it up there for it to be super high, but you could set it lower to like 2 or 1 and see how your answer changes. And then finally, we'll fit the k-means model on X. So once you get that done, I want you to type these print statements in order to take a look at the model outputs. So the cluster centers are where these two centroids ended up converging to. And you can see that we have one centroid at a kind of shorter burst, which is about 2 minutes long and about an hour apart. And then we had a second longer eruption, which is about 4 minutes long, and it takes 80 minutes for the eruption to come back. So that's kind of interesting. And then SSE is the standard sum of squared errors. So we're going to minimize this value over a certain number of iterations, and in this case, the iterations were 5. We can check the results of our fit by looking at the labels. So these are ones and zeros. That would be the classifications that result from the model fit. So ones would indicate from this 4 minute longer interruption category, and zeros would be from this shorter category. And we can separate the two eruption categories, and then we're almost ready to plot. So we'll use those categories by filtering with the flags, flag 0 and flag 1, to get those category 0 eruptions and category 1. Or sorry, category 1 and category 2. And so now we're going to replace our generic plots, which we made at the beginning, with our eruption data. And so to build a dictionary that holds the data we want to display, we're going to use what we call key value pairs. So for category 1 eruptions, we'll use X1, which will be category 1. And for our category 2 eruptions, we'll use X2 and category 2 for the keys. And so that will show our independent variables plotted on the X and Y axis. Next, we'll add a custom layout to make the plot more beautiful. So I just put these in here because I wanted the plot to look a little bit nicer than the default configuration, or maybe just a little more customized. So it's in the code that I provided, but if you want to play around with it on your own, that's totally cool. And remember Paige from part one? Well, it's back. So we're going to, it's back with a vengeance too. So we're going to put this control into Paige. Data is the values from the TypePy, and chart is the control type. And remember, there's all of these different keywords we need to add on. So mode equals markers means that we're not going to plot a line like we did originally. We're going to plot these little points. And then the next pipe, the next pipe is all of the x1 variables, all the x2, all the the y1s, the y2s, the color 1, color 2, and then the layout. And so at the end, we'll run the GUI. And you'll see that we get two types plotted super nicely. So our category 1 and our category 2 have both been identified. And it looks like the boundary is almost, there's almost just this threshold of minutes, probably around, it looks like it's probably around 75 minutes where the two just diverge. So that's kind of interesting to note. And I'm not going to make you take another quiz. You've taken a lot of quizzes. I want to add some interactivity. And we want the user to be able to add their own eruptions, classify them, and see them in context. So we're going to build that in. So we're going to add some new elements to our UI. And I'm going to show you here. So you need to actually add a break in your string, like we did here on line 77, if you want to add a new line. So we'll say add your own eruption by entering the data below, and then we'll have the eruption length in minutes and a input control so the user can paste their own eruption time. And then we'll have the time since last eruption, and we'll call that our waiting stat. And then we type submit button to submit our scenario, and a message at the end. And the message is going to be, what is the eruption type? Okay. So I'm going to instantiate these variables by typing eruption stat equals 0, waiting stat equals 0, and message equals empty. But those are not going to be the default values. Or I'm sorry, they're not going to be the ultimate values. They are the default values, but they ultimately are going to be changed by the user. So you'll configure the scenario by adding tasks and nodes. And so configure the data nodes. You'll have eruption stat, waiting stat, and ID equals message. And then we'll build the message task configuration by typing build message. Classify eruption. I know we haven't made that function yet, so we will soon. Don't worry, but I just wanted to put a placeholder function there because we will need some kind of function to interpret this node. And then output node will be the message. So the message will probably look something like, oh, your eruption is a category, whatever category, right? So then we'll configure the scenario, which is composed of the tasks plus the nodes. So that is the same as last time, and we'll move along. So don't forget to leverage our k-means clustering algorithm. We just trained it on a bunch of data, so we should use it for something, right? And so we're using the function classify eruption, which will accept two parameters, user eruption and user waiting. And if the integer value of the prediction is 0, then is 1, then it will tell us cool, your eruption is category 1. And otherwise, it'll tell us cool, your eruption is category 2. Okay. So this .predict method is built into sklearn, and once we have our model trained, we can use it on any arbitrary data. But don't forget, we need a function that will abstract our .submit and allow the user to state to influence how the scenario is built. So we want to make sure that we're allowing the state to be updated and not just displaying 0 forever. So with that in mind, we'll change our submit scenario function a little bit and write new states. So we have our eruption stat, and we'll write that to the state. We have our waiting stat, and we'll write that also to the state value. And then when we submit, we will then read the message back and update the state once again. So we're now using the state and interfacing with the tasks, or with the scenario, to get that. And we have our final step, which is to actually build the scenario. So you'll use the same exact codes we used last time. This actually doesn't change at all, funny enough, from TypePy workshop.py. And remember, TypePy workshop py2 is or TypePy tutorial 2 is the file that you want to follow if you've gotten lost or you need some help. And if you want to slow down and watch it again, that's the beauty of recordings. So we will have a recording of this available to view. But yeah, once you test this out, so check this out. If we have a eruption that's 4.6 minutes long and 25 minutes since the last one, that's a little bit of a strange eruption, has almost characteristics of both, and you wouldn't be sure how to classify it on your own. But using our machine learning algorithm, we know that it is a category 1 eruption. Okay, great to know. And here's an at-home challenge for you to check out while you're playing around and waiting for next Global Hack Week challenge or task. So can you plot the new data point on the chart? So try doing this using red or some other color to distinguish it from the data set. And I'll give you a hint. This is going to involve adding another point to the chart control. So you're going to need to update the data in that chart. All right, so I'll give you that to try out, and I will share the link in the chat. I just did actually share the link in the chat, so you can take a look at that. And yeah, if you want to try the wrap-up, that's totally cool. And I'll give you a couple minutes to fill out that wrap-out. All right, so Natalia says, thanks for this workshop. Thank you so much. And yeah, so really hope this helped you to feel a little more confident in some ML data visualization, clustering algorithms. At least now you know what is a clustering algorithm, how do they work behind the scenes a little bit. So yeah, it was great to meet everybody on the stream, and hope you have a great rest of Global Hack Week.